Hey everyone, Ryan from Ebike Escape. This is the last part of a series of videos that I released as a conversation with Kevin Duggar, who is the owner of Ride1Up. We covered a bunch of different things in previous videos. We talked about Shimano components, we talked about updates coming from Ride1Up, we talked about regulation, we talked about what's going on in the e-bike industry today. And so in this video, Kevin and I go through various electric bike brands. Now, obviously, keep in mind, Kevin at Ride1Up, they sell their own electric bikes, so obviously there's some bias there, but I think he was pretty open with what he thought of each different brand. One thing that we didn't cover in this conversation, and Kevin actually followed up after we completed this recording, and he wanted to highlight, if you are looking to purchase an electric bike, you do want to check the company's parts list as well as their replacement part costs, just because it can be really annoying if you need a new charger or perhaps a battery in 2 years and the company either doesn't sell them anymore or they charge a huge premium. So look at some of those prices, for instance, if you were to need to replace a battery, because some of the batteries can get quite expensive. Kevin noted that he sees many companies charging huge margins on batteries, chargers, and other parts, knowing that they can charge whatever they want because the parts are obviously needed by the customer. With that, if you are looking to purchase one of the brands that we talk about today, I do have affiliate relationships with some of them, and if you found this helpful, I do appreciate if you use the links in the description. I'll have links to all the brands that we talk about in this discussion. And our conversation was actually quite long. We talked about a bunch of different brands and we went into detail. I do not have experience with all of these brands, but I am aware of them. So if you own one of these electric bikes from one of these companies and you want to share your experience with them, would love to hear about it in the comments. I personally have not ridden all of these electric bikes from all of these companies. We're just sharing our opinion from what we see on the website and what we've seen from our own research. With that, I hope you enjoy this conversation with Kevin. I know I certainly did. Okay, so now let's get to, I think, which is going to the most interesting topic. So Kevin is kind of willing to share his insider opinion of some other brands available and at different price levels. So Kevin, maybe you just want to start and talk about kind of your perspective on brands.
But yeah, regarding the companies, I don't know if you had any in mind, or you want to just go over, like, if we can, we could even put up like a list and go through them, or if you want me to just try to summarize the ones that I know of. I know of just so many different e-bike companies. The popular ones, I mean, I'm gonna just write them down personally, so I have a list of them, so I can write them. But yeah, if you have any that were on your radar that you think customers would be curious about.
Yeah, I mean, let's start in kind of the, not to talk about direct competition. I think they are slightly different, but I mean, I think the obvious one is Rad Power Bikes. I talk about them a lot.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of them. You know, they've are. I don't know if did you listen to the podcast that Mike Ranbaugh did with How I Built This?
No. Okay. I should. Now I will.
Yeah, it is so amazing. I have some tidbits that I've just memorized because it's just so impressive. So they will grow 300% this year. So 100 million estimated e-bike sales last year. 2020 is estimated to be 300 million whenever that was recorded. Wow. And at the time that podcast was recorded, they had more electric bikes on order than they had sold since 2015.
Wow. Jeez.
So they are.
Well, they don't. Yeah, they don't need my support or criticism. Then I don't think it makes a difference.
Yeah, and I mean they gave some other stats in various articles about scaling up their customer service, which is obviously something that, in my opinion, that they're really well known for. But as we had just been discussing, they just can't. Their hands are tied at some of these problems, and of course, if they're doing their best, and but there's still obviously frustrations around it. But yeah, and actually they've increased their prices on a few models, 3 models. A few weeks ago I wrote about. So that's really interesting because they're kind of deviating a little bit from the $1,500 price point, which I kind of view as like the sweet spot of
Yeah.
getting something that's like still going to be really decent. Um, I kind of use your 700 series as a gauge for kind of comparing what other bikes are at $1,500. You get the hydraulic disc brakes, which I really like with the 700 series. And Rad still has their Rad City at 1,500, but it's their let's see, Rad Rover went up to 1,599, Rad Wagon 1,699, which is the same as their Rad Runner Plus.
I'm gonna download that. It's on September 7th. I found it.
Yeah. Super interesting. Super interesting.
Yeah, definitely. But no, I need to listen to that now. But yeah, I mean, my feedback on Rad, I don't think it's, that's one of the more known companies. So I think maybe not as relevant. I think they obviously they support their customers and they have a good following and a strong product. It's as other people have noted, I mean, just visually, they went with their kind of simple, easy to maintain designs. They haven't updated it for a long time, with their external mounted batteries and their external mounted controllers. And I think they'll keep it that way. I don't know. I can only speculate there. But whereas, a lot of newer companies are trying to integrate the electronics more, for that more like bicycle look. But they are doing exactly what our mission is, which is replacing people's car trips as much as possible. And they offer obviously like models like the Rad Wagon and ones that will actually carry tons of cargo around, so you can actually replace your car in more situations. I mean, they're not, it's not the bike I would go for, but that's not really the point.
Yeah.
Just looking at their models, obviously they're it's just they're kind of sticking with their original look in a lot of ways. And really they build really functional bikes.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll be super curious what they do, because I feel like at some point they do need to have more of an integrated look, because more and more people are going to prefer that, like an e-bike that doesn't necessarily look like one. I mean, I prefer it. I prefer the much cleaner bike. The only kind of, I guess, pause I have with some of them is, you want to make sure you buy from a brand that's using at least battery cases that are standardized. So if, for instance, someone were to go out of business, you can still buy a replacement battery. I mean, I'm not interested in buying an e-bike that's, not going to be repairable. Like, that's not interesting to me at all. And I mean, with the Rad bikes, you could pretty much strip everything down and make it into whatever you wanted, obviously provided you're using a hub drive motor. So with that caveat, the integrated battery is always my preference.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like these Rad batteries, the way they have them now, the external ones would be easy to replace down the road. I'm sure they're going to stock those battery packs for quite some time, but I'm sure one year, maybe 2022, who knows what year, they're going to revamp their fleet with a more, sleek integrated design.
Yeah.
I would imagine they would kind of do it in one move, in which they change them all so they're more uniform. But I don't know. I mean, maybe they won't. Some people seem to be fine and like that separate, external controller battery look and functionality. It does, if your controller is exposed like that, like they put it depends on the model. Some of them they put them on that seat tube. Some of them, like, well, the Rad Wagon's different. Is that the one you have, the Rad Wagon?
Yeah, well, I have a 2018 Rad Wagon, but my brother just got that new Rad Wagon 4, and I did a review on that. That's the unique 22-inch by 3-inch wide tires.
Okay. Yeah.
But functionally, it's very similar to mine, and I mean, we both love it because we have kids and they ride on the back, and so it's super useful for what we use it for, and car replacement, as you said.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Who knows when they're gonna go, get around to like revamping those models. But yeah, it does seem some of the components, some of the design seems it's more functional based, less about like, having that sleek modern design, and more about having that kind of functionality. And if you look at most of their models, they really do stick with the fat tire model, or the fat tire idea. Whereas I think what the city, city is the only one with narrow tires, right? Am I wrong? Or
No,
I'm not an expert on
I
the
guess, I mean, I knew that a lot of them are fat tires, but now that you say that, yeah. So I mean, they really only have, yeah, they only have the
one.
Rad City and
Which
the Rad City step through.
it seems like a lot of people for e-bikes are totally fine and like that fat tire. And that's what that's what I was seeing with that brand Himiway, was that so many people seemingly like that's kind of the design for them, was the large battery, huge battery, large tires, totally fine with a heavy bike. It's kind of like you're building more of like a moped, because I imagine in those bikes, the amount of human power that's actually propelling them is less than 5 to 10% or less. I would imagine, because just the inefficiency in the design of the bike, it's like there's I wouldn't expect you could actually use it as a bike too well. And they're like 75 pounds, and fat, thick tires. But again, if it's an e-bike, you can just throttle through it, and you have a 17 amp hour battery that'll last a long time, a long, long
Yeah,
time.
I think the weight is such an unrelated or underrated spec that people look at. In my opinion, I tell so many people, look at the weight of these bikes, please. Not only because you might not be able to handle it, but for instance, all the bikes that I've tried from Ride1Up, if you needed to, you could pedal it without the motor. It might not be as efficient, but for instance, if you run out of battery, something happens, it's nice to know that you're not going to be stuck somewhere. So
Yeah. Yeah, I
so
think that's what a lot of the American bike industry bikes, they try to do almost too much. We're almost like an in between. Like you look at a lot of Specialized or Treks, and they're like trying to keep them like bikes that are just boosted, and then you look at the opposite end of the spectrum, that like Rad or Himiway style, and they're like more like, or even juiced. Really, it depends on which model, obviously. But they're like trying to be more like mopeds, or just here, we get what you want. You want throttle, you want relax, let the motor do everything, and you're that. And we're like almost trying to bridge that a little. Like here's a bike. Here's your, you can still rely on your motor all you want, but you have more of a bike looking bike. You can see that a lot of people seem to really like that, large battery, large bike, large, just, kind of that more moped style, but it still fits in the category of bike, and it's still street legal and doesn't have to be registered with the DMV and all those good benefits, and nice, like kind of easy casual use.
yeah, I mean, the nice thing is there's truly an electric bike for everyone. I mean,
Yeah.
no matter what you're looking at, and once you figure out what you want, which I think is a problem for a lot of people, get so many emails about it, then you have to compare versus brands and those sort of things. So you mentioned Himiway, which is actually interesting because we just did 2 posts about both there and step through, which is very comparable. I mean, spec wise, almost better than the Rad Rover at $1,400, which is really, really impressive. And they also have a new bike, which has the best name ever. It's called the Escape, which is a moped style electric bike, which is pretty interesting because, those have obviously been I feel like a huge trend for 2020 is so many different types of moped style electric bikes that you don't necessarily, I mean, I have a Aerial Rider X Class and I don't pedal that thing when I take it out. It's not comfortable for me.
Yeah.
Some people do, but it's just so fun to rip around with. But I mean, you're not getting any exercise. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, any other thoughts on, I guess maybe Himiway or moped style electric bikes? Would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, the Escape. I think Ford should go after him. I'm not sure that's that's not something that I would be comfortable naming a model, but I guess it doesn't, completely different industry. But I don't think it matters to them because they're not really they're not an American brand. That's Himiway is a direct from China or Asia company. I look at some of the things they do, and I'm kind of surprised that they get away with it. But who knows? It's kind of like the wild, wild west in some ways, where you're not seeing a lot of enforcement on it's hard for consumers to know what's done authentically and what's done correctly and within the law and blah, blah, blah. Like, I think they were saying, oh, your throttle can go up to 28 and that's totally fine for your laws. It's a class 3 bike. And they're like, it's totally legal. And I'm like, no, they were posting that information. It's like, you may not be aware. I don't know if you are aware, but that's definitely not. Anyway, there's other issues. Oh, and I just now noticed on their websites, they're like, well, all of our governing laws is to be in accordance with the laws of the UK. I wonder why that is. Oh, they're registered in England. Anyway, I would be cautious of that one because they're offering things like a 2-year warranty. But I don't know that you have much recourse if anything goes wrong. Like, I'm in support of a lot of companies, but that's one that you're really not going to be able to do much when things go wrong. I've noticed some people in various e-bike forums complain, like, obviously really upset because they're at the point where, okay, I can't do anything. They decided that this wasn't a defect or a warranty issue, or they decided this, and they can't even state their opinion publicly because this is a company that won't allow neutral reviews. They won't allow Facebook reviews or Google reviews or any neutral review. So the only thing you'll see about this company is, ads on Facebook, ads on Google, and then reviews on their site, which, as e-bike companies go, reviews on their own site is as authentic as you want to make it. It's not going to be authentic. Himiway deleted a ton of reviews and when things went wrong. But yeah, I very much would question a 2-year warranty on some of the things on the authenticity of that. But yeah, you can browse it and look at this. It's wouldn't be my recommendation. I think there's a ton of good e-bike companies out there, and self-starters and Lectric XP. They offer a great value bike, and all these other people. But the Himiway one is is definitely one of those, like, it's just going under the radar. It's kind of a direct from Asia. Their about page is kind of I think just kind of a made up story, which really doesn't make sense. But anyway, what do I know? I may be wrong. I would be cautious with that one because it seems like there's some false advertising there. I'm sure a ton of people got great bikes because their bikes look solid. Like I said, those are more of those moped style, the bigger ones that are heavier, larger battery, so good range. You're going to get good specs. I can look through I'm just kind of looking through their site so I can make any comments as I see them. They didn't brand some of their things. They have a motor they didn't brand. I guess some companies do this, is they'll put a logo on their motor from whichever supplier is making their motor, as they're not likely making it in-house, which, you'd have to be a specialist in making motors and bikes, which is like kind of a different, you know what I mean? It's just a different thing, a different industry. So they're usually just having somebody put their logo as Rad would, or as whoever would. Large companies like Juiced, or I don't know actually who's specifically doing it at this point, but I've seen it before, with various companies, is they'll have their own logo on the motor or on a fork or on a component that, obviously another company is making on a display. And so, they notice that they don't list who makes their motors, and they don't list who makes their fork. And they don't list, there's some other little components. I'm kind of learning as we're talking on some of them, but they just don't share it. It's one of those Chinese companies that's going to operate much like the Chinese government, in that transparency, openness, and dissent is not always allowed. So you have to be cautious.
I feel like with them, perhaps you get a bike, and if you have no issues with it, it might be totally fine, and you never have to work with them. Or down the road, you're gonna do some upgrades anyway, and the batteries are fine, and you upgrade the motor or whatever. But yeah, I mean, customer support is so important.
And they may offer, they may be helpful. I don't have experience with it, so I can't say. But just the idea that there isn't a neutral platform for people to share, publicly post about things. It's tricky. It's a little, I would be wary if somebody doesn't allow, like, whether that's Yelp, Facebook, Google, some platform to post problems where, like, hey, this company didn't step up at all.
Yeah, maybe check out the Electric Bike Review forums if you
Yeah,
are considering
yeah, that's a good
those,
idea.
because obviously that's an independent third party, and obviously if I ever get to review one of those e-bikes or something, I will definitely give my honest opinion. So
Awesome. Yeah, what else? There were some other companies. I know there's other major players there. I know Aventon, by the way. Aventon's one that I
yeah,
like a lot. I mean, they've been in the bike industry longer than we have. They've been making regular bikes for a long time and kind of transitioned as the boom was going to e-bikes, so that way, they wouldn't fall behind. I know some companies obviously were probably stuck with just bikes, but Aventon switched pretty quickly. And as you can tell, they have some nice models.
yeah, maybe I think that would be interesting to dig into, because that's a question I get sometimes. You know, the Ride1Up e-bikes look very similar to Aventon,
Yeah.
and Aventons are sold at bike shops, which is super interesting. Um, so we were talking about Aventon, comparing Ride1Up. Obviously, the frames look very similar. I mentioned someone wrote like a big email to me talking about all these significant differences, which I personally didn't feel a lot of them were significant. One thing I think they mentioned was the extruded aluminum frames versus hydroform aluminum frames. Maybe you can talk about some of the comparisons from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it depends which model we're talking about. I pulled up their level bike that was probably most similar. Their Aventon level was very similar to our 700 series. And if I look at that one, yeah, the one of the things that's going to be very difficult to make look different. I mean, you could obviously, but the down tube with the Re-Engine Rhino battery pack and electronic system, um, and likely they're using a similar controller supplier too for their controllers. It's hard to make that look much different in the way that you're gonna, you have to put that in the down tube. Actually, I think Dost, is it Dost?
Yeah,
There's a
Dost.
yeah, yeah. And I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. There's a company that, they put that in the top tube also. They did it in the double, but obviously it's a large battery pack and it's a large integration. If you've seen this 700 or if you have one, it's pretty beefy. So it's hard to put that in the top tube without it looking kind of ridiculous and the bike weight getting really heavy. So already there with Aventon trying to keep like kind of this one size fitting and well fitting frame for people, that's going to look quite similar, the two models. Their seat tube's obviously quite different. Even their top tube has a quite a different look to it, but very similar frames overall because of that same electronic style. And then their chainstays and integration with the rear dropout is all really similar too, and they put their kickstand in similar position. So yeah, I mean it does look quite similar. Component wise, obviously we use varying, quite different components. And I actually haven't ridden an Aventon level, so I don't even know. I'm not familiar with the performance, so I wouldn't be able to tell you how their motor performs, compared to ours. And I'm actually looking through it now to see if I can't learn more about it. But
Yeah, yeah, and well, I have some specs up too that I wrote about, and maybe I'll talk about those, and you can look in depth more. But on their like Aventon Pace 350 as well as the 500. So the 350, which I kind of compare to the Core 5, it's using a 36 volt, 11.6 amp hour battery. The Aventon Pace is using a 48 volt, but 11.6 amp hour battery. So, you're getting less battery, for sure. Weights are, right around in the range. And then the Aventon Pace is $13.99, whereas the 500 series is obviously $11.95. I think the motors are probably very similar, at least spec wise. From I think they say 500 watts sustained. Your
750 peak. Yeah, I think they're actually using the same Shangyi motor. I just don't think they say it. Some
yeah
companies don't like to write the name. Yeah, they just say brushless rear hub motor. And I guess that's, it's just hesitancy to say what, maybe if you email them and ask or something, they'll state it, or maybe it says it somewhere that I'm not seeing. It just might not be one of those things that they want to post. but I believe they're using the same motor. So that sort of, that riding experience or the speed will be similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, like various components. Let's see. I mean, it depends which model we're comparing, obviously. But I felt like the 700 to the Level was a good comparison.
Yeah.
Theirs is $100 more. And I don't want to, like I said, I think it's a great company. Obviously I would side with us, but that's that's my own bias. But no, I mean, as far as, if you're going to choose one, I don't think that's going to be like a bad choice at
Yeah.
all. They're using different components. I could go into, like, they have solid brakes, I can tell. You're gonna have great stopping power. They're using Kenda tires. This is a good saver, honestly. Maybe we should stop. We're using those Schwalbe Supermoto X tires, which cost us quite a bit more, but
Yeah.
I think they're great. Performance on those Supermoto X tires is great because you kind of get some, it's more road-based performance, but for trails still works perfect, and that's why you saw a lot of rally and other American, not specialized, but a lot of other major players in the e-bike industry and the bike industry used those Supermoto Schwalbe tires because they were really popular for basically as like as a road bike or a commuter bike, but one that you can take on dirt trails and have great traction still.
Yeah, I mean, I really like them on the limited, and we've definitely done crushed gravel a little bit over the weekend. We actually took it even a little bit more off road, and they're fine.
Yeah, it's a good touring tire. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's tough because you don't really want to sell mountain bike tires because if the majority of the time you're riding on the road, it's just not, it's not the best option to have some knobby tires. Sure, it's fine, you'd be fine, but you're just creating more drag and less traction.
Yeah, I think the other thing, if we're looking at the Level, I mean, they're offering 3 frame sizes, which can make a difference for some people, perhaps. I mean, I personally haven't ridden it on the 700 series, but you can get a small frame on the Aventon Level, and I know, like, for instance, at least even comparing the Core 5 step through to the 500 series step through, it seems to me like the Core 5 felt like the smallest electric bike that you offer. Like, my mom's 5.5 or 5.4 or something, and she tried both, and she was way more comfortable on the Core 5.
Yeah, was it the step through?
Yeah, it was a step through.
Yeah, and that's kind of like how we designated our sizes, is we sized down the step through models, and then we sized up the XR frames or the standard frame. So in that sense, we are a little bit limited. We only have maybe a 10-inch height window for most of our frames, which seems to fit really quite well. I mean, with minor tweaks, right? If you're tall, I'm 6'2", and if you're taller, sometimes you want to adjust the stem or the handlebar position so you're a little bit more upright. I mean, just depending on what ride feel you want, and even sometimes depending on the seat post length, you may want a longer extended seat post. Ours are stock 350 millimeter, but sometimes taller, like 6'4" guys by that 400 450 millimeter seat post, so you can extend it all the way. We've seen a couple times people will, and for a little while we had 300 millimeter seat posts, which were just too short if you're taller. But we've seen a couple times people will, and I think these are ones with 300 millimeter seat posts, is they would extend it to the edge of the limit of the seat post, and they would snap. I mean, a couple times I saw it snap or crack the alloy of the frame.
Yeah.
Because it was, I mean, you need to have that seat post have a little bit more traction points than just the very end of the frame.
Right. I mean, I've seen that on. I mean, you if you follow any Facebook groups, you're bound to see someone who has no idea what they're doing, and they install it past the minimum insertion or whatever,
right.
And that's going to happen no matter what e-bike it is.
Yeah, I know. It's still, it's disappointing. You don't want it to happen. But yeah, if you're taller, the 350 should be fine. Like for me, it's totally fine if I put it up near the end, honestly. But 6'4", 6'5", sometimes you do want a 400 millimeter seat post.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. like I said, yeah, we 5'5" and below, it's really hard to fit our step over our standard frame. And that is kind of limiting. They have a small that'll fit that'll fit more heights in that same frame, whereas our small is kind of the step through frame. That being said, obviously at 6 foot, you're like around 6 foot, 6?
Yep. 6 feet.
Yeah, the the step through frame I'm sure was comfortable for you,
Yeah.
but if you start to get a little bit taller, it's obviously less comfortable.
Yeah, I was fine on the Core 5. 500 series felt a little bit better. My
That was the
sister-in-law felt
standard frame 500. Sorry.
no, step through, step
Oh,
through.
okay.
Both were step through. So it was really cool to compare really side by side, and I preferred the 500 series felt a little bit better, and I wrote about that too, like in detail, just so if anyone's curious about those two compared, I gave my thoughts, and
Yeah.
for an extra $100, it's kind of as long as the 500 series fits, like I feel like that has to be one of the best value electric bikes on the market at $1,200. So
Yeah, I still think it's a value that can't really be beat, but
yeah,
again, that's what we say. But yeah, I think if you don't need a suspension fork though, the Core 5 is great
yeah,
still because
sure,
you're getting similar performance. But I sometimes, if I'm only riding roads, actually like the rigid fork ride. It
sure,
depends. It gives you a completely different feel, but you almost feel like more in control when you're riding
yeah,
a rigid fork than a suspension fork. But if you see, if you have a ton of potholes and you don't see them, it can be
yeah,
a rude awakening.
sure. All right, so let's talk about some other brands. You mentioned Lectric XP in passing. That's one I often recommend to people because, especially people who are, maybe haven't been on a bike in 10, 20 years or something like that. It was $8.99, I believe they're still at, and they have a step through option now. I feel
Yeah.
like the other one wasn't like a horribly high step over height anyway. But like so that company is really specializing two models, nothing fancy. That's, I assume, how they're able to get the price so significantly low on those.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll have to like put up little windows if you can. Again, I don't want to put more video editing tasks on you, but if you're able to like pull up, the screen for those bikes as you're describing them, I'm sure that'd be cool. But yeah, no, they're
Yeah,
nice. It's a good, I think, like us, they're that direct to consumer value. So there's not a lot, you're basically uh, paying most of your money is going towards the bike or a good portion of it, where they're not they're not spending a lot elsewhere, and they're not paying that margin to anybody else. So there's I think their value is appropriate, and obviously like you say, you recommend it if you're looking for a bike in that sub $900 price range. It's great.
yeah. And I mean, to be honest, I get a little bit scared when people come to me like, "Oh, what do you think about this e-bike?" And it's so cheap because not to bash on like Walmart, but you're getting like
More
e-bikes
than
with Walmart grade components, and
right.
there's safety concerns, and it's just not
Right.
going to last. And the Lectric XP is probably the only one that I would tell people at $900 that you should be considering, at least in my research. So
Right.
I feel
Yeah.
like you go below there and it's just gets a little bit scary.
I'm not a fan of step through frames. I know a lot of people are, and that's a good option for them. But they're a little. The two things for me is they're smaller. Less rides, a little bit less like a regular bike. With those telescopic bars or whatever you call those.
Yeah,
They're obviously you can still have an upright ride, and so that kind of makes up for that tiny frame as you have your bars way up. But of course, the performance then is limited there in that you're not going to be able to pull up or put forward pressure on your ride because of that.
yeah. It's a
So
very odd feeling. Very odd feeling.
I think it's comfortable for like casual cruising.
Yeah,
But obviously, yeah, you can't really jam on. You just can't put as much pressure or force on them. So if you start riding, more. I don't want to say just more aggressively because it's more than that. But if you start riding different characteristics of your ride, you can't do all the same things you can with a fully shaped bike with a step
yeah,
through frame.
yeah. I agree with that.
But if you need to fit it in the back of your car, I mean, obviously, then you're looking for a step through frame. But if you want, if you need a regular frame bike, I wouldn't do it. Looking at their component list, yeah, I agree. It's like one that can be maintained. There are some like they're right on the fringe of the their seat post clamp. Maybe they've upgraded it since I'm looking at these photos too. because I'm looking at old ones, but I hate that style seat post clamp. It's kind of that's that Walmart level one. Then
Oh
there's some,
yeah,
but I mean these, I don't know too. I don't know. I'm looking at photos. I don't have the bike, so
right.
but there are trade-offs you have to make, obviously, to be able to price that at $899 and afford it and stay in business. And the Shimano Tourney isn't a derailleur that mechanics are going to want to mess with, but it's one that should totally last if nothing goes wrong. It's definitely it's a gear set that should be fine as long as
Yeah,
nothing goes wrong. I used to, I don't know if you know or if we talked about this in the past, but like before getting into e-bikes or selling any bikes, I used to through college I would repair old bikes. I was like the bike recycle guy, and I would get old Giants, Treks, Nishikis, whatever it was, and fix them up and repair their components and replace when needed. And like there were just some, there was a level of componentry where you're like, all right, throw that bike away, that Next or that,
yeah,
I'm trying to think of those Target, Walmart brands, and I can't even remember some of the names, but you would just be like, all right, nobody's going to work on that. That might as well go into the dump. And that was kind of like, that was the lesson of, we don't want to produce a ton of electric junk that's going to be thrown away when somebody's like, all right, I'm 4 years, 3 years in, 4 years in, I'm upgrading this bike to, I like e-bikes. I want to get a nicer level one. And, how can I sell this one? And yeah, they can probably still sell it. Like, it looks like obviously this Lectric XP, if it's running, somebody's going to want to buy it. And like you said, other ones you saw on Amazon, like what was a popular one? Was it Eco Trick or Nakto? Nakto was
yeah, yep,
popular Chinese one. Was like, I don't think when that starts to wear in and when repairs and maintenance and tuning are like, there's some deferred maintenance, I don't think that many people would want to work on it, or that, there's a point where your value is not worth the repair.
yeah.
And that's where you just don't want to see a bunch of, you don't want to see a bunch of bikes going to the landfill, just a bunch
Yeah,
of cheap shit imported that's then thrown away, and then you've defeated the whole going green purpose.
yeah. All right, well, maybe we should get into like, are there any other brands that you want to talk about? I mean, particularly like some areas that I haven't explored quite as much as like, the $2,000 price range, even more than that. I know there's a bunch of different brands. I have yet to test some out. I mean, we mentioned Dost, which I think is a very interesting company that Sam over there, he came from like Surface 604, so he's got like a ton of e-bike experience, and like I see that they're out of stock. Those are $2,800, which is maybe a little bit more, but has that more premium dual battery setup, and they're using the Bafang mid-drive motors that are kind of tried and true. I don't know, any other comments about like companies that you think kind of strike a really good price for performance when you're looking at maybe spending a little bit more to get some higher quality components?
I'd have to look a little. I think iZip was one of them.
Okay.
I can't remember now. I should have written those down for you. Do you have any that you're seeing customers ask about a lot? Or not customers, I guess, just
I get people asking about them. It's hard when I really struggle to recommend products that I at least don't spend a lot of time comparing in those things. One that I found super interesting, Lectric did a review on it just the other day, and Priority Cycles, they have a belt drive, internally geared hub, motor, and I think they were offering it for like $300 off with like a special code. But that seemed like a really incredible value, because I feel like when you're getting towards the like $3,000 price range, then you start comparing these brands to like a Specialized or a Trek, or some of the main brands, which again, I'm not as well versed in what Trek is, and I'm in contact with Specialized to try to check out some of their e-bikes and some of these different brands that I got to meet at Sea Otter. But that one was super interesting because one, the belt drive, which I know you're probably a fan of, the Roadster V2 has that, and I really want to try a belt drive bike, but I don't know if you have that pulled up. I'd be curious what you think.
I did when you mentioned it, the Priority Current e-bike.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can take a look. They do have a belt drive, so I'm guessing if they want to have a belt drive, they'll probably, yeah, they'll be doing uh, an internally geared hub with the
Yeah.
mid-drive motor, which is kind of the only way to allow gears with a belt drive, and that's kind of obviously, one thing worth noting, but most people should probably find out pretty quick is that, um, if you want to have a belt drive, you're not going to have gears unless you have an internally geared hub, which presents its own complications and expenses, but it can work fine. And it's kind of a cool. I know a lot of people that like that because obviously belts are nice when done right, and they're simpler, last a long time, and it's kind of a trendy thing. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But let's see. Well, it looks like I'm trying to figure out what they're doing there. It looks like mid-drive, and then um, yeah, it's a nice looking bike. I guess if that's what you want, I think for 3,000, I think there are a lot of better traditional e-bike industry
Yeah.
e-bikes.
You
For
should at least be looking at them, right?
Yeah, you mean for the priority current one?
No, no, like you should be looking at some
Oh,
of the other standardized
yeah,
brands.
yeah, yeah. There's some, yeah, and I mean it is a good looking bike. Let's see what they have for their motor. I don't have all their specs, and honestly, you telling me is the first time I've heard of that. So I'm not going to be able to
Yeah.
give you that much of valuable
I
feedback.
think I
They
think it's just
do,
an interesting, looking into what, what some of the things that you can get for more money, I guess.
yeah, and
And I
they do.
know they're offering it at like 26.99. A lot of people are looking at mid drives, are looking to spend a little bit more. So
I'm looking at their frame. It looks like it's a 36-volt battery. I would imagine 36-volt
looks
motor.
like
Oh no, it's 48
40,
volt. It's
48
48
volt,
volt. I
48
see it.
volt, 500 watt mid drive. Yeah, see, it'd be nice if they said like what kind of motor, and because
Yeah.
obviously, like you said, they're not using.
Usually frames or battery integrations that narrow are usually 36 volt, but they must have. It's kind of a longer one, and I don't
Yeah,
know what battery they're using, but that's pretty. I mean, it's pretty normal looking,
yeah,
which is nice. And they did the top tube is weird to me in that look. You know how they did that
yeah,
semi step over because it's just so different. But that's cool. It's definitely something different. But yeah, no, I mean it looks nice. Obviously, 3,000. It's you should get some benefits from that
yeah.
added expense. Sorry, yeah, that's the first time I've heard of that model. So I had to. I
Yeah,
don't
well,
have
I just
all the
recently
info.
found out about them too. So,
Yeah.
what one other brand, I'd be curious if you have any thoughts on Sondors, particularly their new
Oh yeah,
models.
Sondors is a big one. Let me
Yeah,
see
maybe
what
we'll talk about Sondors, and then we can talk about some of the last remaining things we
comment.
got. But
Sure. Yeah. Sondors, what do they have right now? Which models were you curious about? I know that they introduced those mid-drive models that people were pretty stoked about.
yeah, the Rockstar, which
Yeah.
just looks so beastly. I mean, I think it looks amazing, in my opinion. Like it looks like a downhill, really rugged, like
So,
mountain bike, basically.
yeah. Oh, they got that lock-in browser scrolling. I don't like that.
Yeah, it forces you
uh,
to.
yeah. No, it's like a little mini motorcycle is what it looks like to me. They got the the wing flats like a motorcycle does,
Yeah,
like as if they're protecting their the intake or something. Um, it does look cool for sure. Because it's definitely unique, right? And they've kind of had that expensive head tube structure as there's some features when you're bringing out a new model that you want to just have for that attention grabber or
yeah,
wow, and that little head tube gap is something that's kind of cool. But I guess the one problem with judging these is that they still are just renderings, and at least on their site. I'm sure they put real
yeah.
photos up somewhere.
They
But
had like they had like an Instagram live where they showed an actual bike,
yeah, there
um,
you go. Yeah,
and
because
I
on on their website, it's hard to buy when you're like looking at just a bunch of computer renderings of like, hey, this is what it'll look like. Because, what does it look like when you have your wire integration? What does it look like when you actually have all of these things built with that, with real tires, not fake, fake concepts. But it it looks pretty similar.
Yeah, it looked very similar. And I thought that there was something in my email maybe that they showed. They're taking it for a test ride or something. I mean, I think I'm not personally interested in buying any like pre-order bikes. I know Sondors is relatively established. Yeah. I think these are just really interesting new age looking e-bikes from a company that hasn't been their bread and butter. Like the bike frames with the just big triangle. Like I think that looks horrible. I know some people have them. It's just not something I think looks good at all. So they go from, and I think some of their foldable bikes look really cool, and their step throughs are like decently looking. Well, I just don't like that big triangle.
I know people like that also that have them and they love them. And that's the thing about e-bikes is they're so fun as a concept that even if you have kind of an antiquated design that's not it doesn't offer as much as you could for the same value or even just for 2020, it's like missing so many things that we'd be like, wow, first off, that's heavy, you're wasting a lot of space, it's not aerodynamic, you don't have suspension, blah blah blah, you have it's not going to ride smooth without battery. For people that maybe don't know that they're missing it, they're like, yeah, but it does everything that an e-bike's going to do, which is like, I'm getting that boost, I'm cruising, I can see everything, I'm outside more, enjoying it's still going to be a good experience. So it's like hard to say like, well, yeah, but you're missing so much, because it's like, it could still be that they love that bike, like they still love the ride feel and everything.
Yeah. Yes.
So I mean, I say that to people. So like you can't just say like, oh well, that bike is crap, because it's like it's still the feel is the experience is very similar for people. So it'll take them more time, and when they test out more and have more of an experience with different models, they'll start to decide their favorites.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's maybe get to some of these questions, because I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, and the Sondors mid-drive looks cool, by the way. I just want to say it is cool to see them doing a new one. I said that, and again, I'm sorry to I'm kind of going back, but I did Google search it so I could see like a real life photo, and it does look definitely different, but it's like the same. Obviously, you can tell it's the same structure, and one of their wow points of their frame design is that head tube. The way that they integrated the wires right around the head tube and kind of built that gap in their merging of the down tube and the head tube.
Yeah, I think it's just cool that they're taking risks, and I mean, I'm sure it wasn't cheap to design that bike, which is probably why they're going kind of the pre-order route and trying to get some of that money up front to support some of the manufacturing. But
well, you'd be surprised.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, you're probably right, it probably wasn't, but in terms of how much they spent on their molds and all their testing and all that, it's probably not as bad as for a company like that. They could I'm sure they split with their overseas factories. I'm sure they kind of like work together and share some of those costs and expenses in their initial molds and prototypes.
Sure.
And it really wouldn't be too bad for a company of that scale. Like you said, they've been around for a while. But the thing that is expensive is to offer a 21 amp hour battery along with 750 watt. I mean, the motor, medium expensive, right? I think it's a Bafang Ultra?
I'm not sure. Could be.
I'm sure they're using an Asian brand. I don't think they're going to obviously use an American or European brand. So they're, or even like the Japanese, the Shimano mid-drive, they're probably using like Chinese Bafang, which totally fine. Obviously, I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying for that price, I would imagine. But the thing that is expensive that's going to hold them back on keeping that 1900, like I think they initially offered that at 2000, and now I see this one at 2600 or 2599. But that's the thing, is that 21 amp hour battery is big. That's a big one. So like obviously with a mid drive there, you're going to have really good range, but yeah, it's going to bring up the weight and the cost quite a lot. So like, you don't normally see mountain bikes like that's designed, it looks like to be a mountain bike. But you don't normally see mountain bikes that are going to be that, like with that large of a battery, that are that beefy, because it's going to be tough to hit trails with that much weight. My opinion, of course you'll get way more range, so that's good.
Yeah, and I should mention too, I think the Cruiser is also just interesting, different type of model, similar specs, I believe, similar motor. I was looking for the battery life.
Well, they don't even need to put battery life. I mean, it's 21 amp hours. You're getting nearly, or actually, I think it is exactly, or right around exactly 1,000 watt hours, which is huge. And you can do the calculations on I don't have that motor brand, but if it is a Bifang Ultra, you could take a look at the motor efficiency, which is on that mid-drive is maybe around 80 to 85% efficiency of the motor. And again, that changes a lot. Like even within Bosch or Brose or whatever motors, there's different models have different efficiency ratings. But like with that 1,000 watt hour battery, you're gonna get just pretty significant range on it. But those battery sizes are a trade-off. I mean, they're a trade-off because you're gonna, like, these are renderings, but you're gonna have a pretty bulky looking frame to fit that many cells. These are all likely everybody that I know of. I don't know of any that are using cells that are different than 18650. Some people maybe will start using larger 2170 cells or whatever they are. But right now, as far as I know, most people are using 18650 cells. So like, to get 21 amp hours, even at the max capacity cells that people make, it says it right here, they're using LG 3500s, which 3500 cells are the largest that most companies make. I think there are some like auxiliary brands out there that make like 4,000 milliamp hour cells, 18650 cells, but like those you have to use, how many are they using in series? They'd be using a lot. If you could do the math on it, and I'm trying to do it in my head now, and I'm going to say the wrong number, so I won't do it. But you have to use quite a lot of cells, so you're bringing up the weight. It's the same as our milliamp hour capacity of each cell is the same as our 700 series. It's the same as our limited. It's the same as most of the bikes we use. The 500 is just barely under, as it's a 13 amp hour instead of a 14 amp hour. But we just don't increase the amount of cells inside the battery because size and weight. So like their mountain bike is like 65 or whatever plus pounds. So it's like, it's going to be a bulky, like if you want that much capacity of your battery, which some people totally do, be aware that there's always a trade-off there.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you can get a motorcycle, an e-motorcycle, and have a huge amount of range, but it's going to be less like a bike and more like we talked about, like kind of like a motorcycle moped feel.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I think that's the Cruiser's at $2,000, so I think that's kind of an interesting
good
price point. Yeah, especially for like when people ask me about like affordable mid drives, it's like, haven't done a ton of research, but like that, if that, that seems like a pretty good value when you consider.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It must be one of those that when you can do different payment plans. It must be one of those that when they start to get near that stock delivery date, it's like an introductory price, I would imagine, for waiting 4 or 5 months.
Right. Yeah.
I'm guessing. I don't know. Maybe they'll be able to keep it at $19.99. But again, I think a lot of that expense in that is going to be the battery expense.
Yeah. Okay.
And
cool.
they're still rendering so far, so it's cool to see that develop. It'd be really cool to, once they start to actually have those made, to see their full physical photos and not the computer renderings they have. But anyway, sorry, we spent a lot of time on that.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I just think it's one more comment, just different approach from some other e-bike companies where they're like, here's our 2021 models, like no teaser or anything. So that's kind of interesting that they're kind of, showing like something that's coming, 6 months down the road and are willing to share. And so
well, we will try too.
Yeah.
with our new mid-drive motor, It's tough when when things aren't nailed down, and I don't want to share like rendering plans. I want to show what our final full design will be, at least for Gen 1, you know?
Yeah.